Hello, everybody. I wanted to sit down and talk with you today a little bit. Before we get into the topic of this video, I want to talk a little bit about my last video, just to give a little extra context and whatnot. So if you didn't see my last video, it was on biblical inerrancy. And that video got a lot more traction than I was really ever expecting, which is good, but also it ended up highlighting some of the flaws of that video. And that video was a little unpolished, and I knew that when I made it. And part of the reason for that is because I'm not a scholar, and biblical inerrancy is a very complex and very deep topic. And I was really not ready to tackle the entire topic. And I knew that when I made it, and that's why the scope of the video was limited, and that's why I left a lot of things up to interpretation. And I was perfectly willing to say that I just don't know on a lot of these things, because I don't. So I wanted to say that, as well as I wanted to give a little more context on the perspective put forward into the video. My perspective on inerrancy is that the original autographs were divinely inspired. Pretty much all of them that we see, at least in the New Testament, pretty much all the Old Testament as well. And beyond that, I said, I don't know, because I don't. And that brought up a lot of angry Reddit atheists into my comment section, which is fine. That was to be expected if any of these more, what would you say, Christian videos get traction. But a lot of them were criticizing it from the angle of, well, it's a book that pushes the existence of God, so it must be fake. It's like, well, I did this video from the Christian perspective. I did this accepting that A, God is real, and B, that divine inspiration is already an accepted concept. So that was the context of which the video was done in, that scripture is generally reliable, divine inspiration, God exists, etc., etc. And I didn't elaborate on that because I didn't think it needed to be said, but apparently it did. So anyway, let's get on with this video. Let's talk a little bit about faith. So after I uploaded the last video, like I said, it got a lot more traction than I ever really expected. And because of those comments, as is my nature, I kind of got into a few debates in the comment section, particularly about general biblical accuracy and divine inspiration, the existence of God, like I just said, and all of which of those topics are to be expected. But I got into, I think, one particular exchange with a commenter that brought my thoughts to, like, right at the cutting edge of my ability to articulate them, which brought out a few ideas that are really, really deep. So I struggled with what to even title this video, because these ideas weren't prompted by a question. My other videos are all questions, and I title them as questions because I think they frame the videos in a more exploratory way, and it incites a better response from me. And if anyone who's interested in the question can find the video very directly. So, but this one was hard to come up with, because these ideas that I'm about to tell you about, they weren't incited by a question so much as they were ideas that I sort of happened upon somewhat through debate. So this video is fundamentally about faith, and to some extent truth, which is a little on the nose considering the name of this channel. That was not intentional whatsoever. I thought that was a little ironic, but let me tell you a little bit about the lead up to where I got to these ideas. I'm a little on the edge of my seat because I really do want to share these ideas. It's pretty exciting for me. But anyway, one of the debates I was having in the comments of the last video was about divine inspiration, basically, but it shifted basically to just a classic atheism versus theism, does God exist debate, which, again, to be expected. The commenter brought up a few good points about issues with Christianity and the Bible, and I countered with answers to those and some issues with atheism. And it got me seriously thinking about the nature of belief, about faith, about truth, and most importantly, Enlightenment style thinking. Basically, everyone in the modern world abides by the rules that were laid out during the Enlightenment, which is that logic and reason are king. And I have a great respect for the Enlightenment, and there's a very good reason that the Enlightenment has allowed the world to progress to where it is today. There's great wisdom in its perspective on the world. Logic and reason are unbelievably useful tools. But I realized when debating with this commenter, using logic and reason and evidence, I was trying to prove God to an atheist on a fundamentally atheistic battleground. Like when debating in this manner, I was acting under the assumption that the existence of God needs to be proven foremost with logic and evidence. And I think most people, treat logic and reason as if they are the fundamental cornerstone of reality. But the more I thought about this, I've come to realize that there's one massive flaw with this, with placing reason above everything else. Reason can't provide morality. In fact, it's inherently immoral when placed at the top of our values, on top of our value hierarchy. So why? Well, morality isn't a product of reason and logic. It's something deeper. It's something transcendent, if you're willing to go there with me. This is why I've always favored the moral argument for God, because it strikes so much deeper than scientific arguments. If you place reason as king, then what happens when reason disagrees with your conscience? What happens when reason tells you to do something you know is morally unacceptable? That's the problem. There has to be something that is more core to reality than reason and logic. I think that objective morality is just that. And that's the tricky thing about it. Morality by nature cannot be something that is subservient to something else. Everything else has to serve it. It's in its nature. If morality is not our highest value, which sort of parallel if God is not real, if God does not exist, then there is no morality. Ethics inherently cannot exist as a secondary value. They cannot falter to something else. Morality demands that it is placed above all else because it acts as a standard more than it does a value. So if God doesn't exist, then there is no objective morality, regardless of what some people will tell you, because without God, the universe only exists out of absurdity. There is no other explanation. Some people favor a self-designing universe and things of that nature, but all of that's kind of circular reasoning. There's the whole dependency of the universe argument for God, and I think that's quite compelling, but again, we're veering into the scientific arguments, so we're going to stay out of that. Without God, the universe exists. Yeah. Right and wrong cannot exist under the conditions of absurdity. How on earth could you even begin to decipher some kind of right and wrong out of a world that exists only out of absurdity? An absurd universe is inherently meaningless and has no value, which means that there is no possibility of right and wrong. Like the postmodernists will tell you that morality is just a social construction. The problem with that is social constructions are relative and they're only decided by consensus. And there are times when people will have a consensus on something that is very much immoral. So morality, this ethical standard, has to be above that. There is some objective morality that is above consensus and above social construction. There's something transcendent that calls us forward. This is the core problem with atheism. Without God, there is no right and wrong, and the universe is devoid of even a shred of meaning. And I'm not the first person to come up with this idea by any means. Most notably, Jordan Peterson came to mind because he's been a substantial philosophical influence to me. And he's brought up sort of bits and pieces of this before. A number of other philosophers have as well, but he just came to mind initially. But I can never really wrap my head around this idea because until recently, when I was looking beyond, I was peering beyond my own unarticulated presuppositions about logic and reason. So this was a profound realization for me. And I've, again, like, it's been in the corner of my mind. It's been whispering in my ear for some time, but I've never been able to articulate it until recently. So what else do we need to go over here? I think it also speaks to what the true nature of faith is. Faith is not how many atheists characterize it, as blind belief in fairy tales to help prevent death anxiety, nor is it how some pastors present it, as shutting yourself off to outside criticism because the Bible is perfect and you need not hear criticism from anyone else. I think faith is steadfast belief, trust, and hope in transcendent good and objective morality, even when reason seems to contradict what we think we know about the world, religion, the Bible, etc. It's staking your life on the idea that there is right and wrong, regardless of what logic and reason might tell you. And I know that sounds abrasive to abandon logic that way. We as a society are so locked into an atheistic sort of logic is supreme style of thinking that we hold the voices of logic and reason above the voice of our conscience. And that's not to say you should ignore logic and reason. In fact, I believe quite the opposite. Logic and reason should be one step away from morality and conscience, the second in command, so to speak. There's a reason that the idea of the divine logos is so central to Christianity. It has a role. Logic certainly has a role. Reason has a role, and it's more than just an important one. It's incredibly important. It's central even, but it's not the utmost. It's not the highest. If you're an atheist or an agnostic listening to this, first of all, I'm very thankful that that you've stayed around thus far. But I implore you to think about this. Think about how you deal with objective morality, because as far as I can tell, to accept morality of any kind is to reject atheism, because I can't see how that you can extract morality from a universe based on absurdity, and a social constructionist view of morality just doesn't work. It can't. It doesn't withstand. So, Christians listening to this, I implore you to think about whether or not you've been placing reason and logic above God, but also to work on incorporating logic and reason properly, to contend with it, to reconcile it, but never place it above what is righteous. So the evidence for and against the existence of God will always be somewhat ambivalent, because God is beyond our conception. He's beyond natural law. So the question is, because there's always going to be that question of whether or not there is God, that's never going to be fully answered. It's never going to become fully apparent to you. So the question is, and always will be, are you going to have faith in what you cannot fully see? Are you going to be willing to explore that? Are you going to choose to act as if the universe is meaningful and that you have some responsibility to do good and be righteous, conduct yourself in an ethical manner? Faith and morality have to be the cornerstone of reality. Everything is meaningful or it's not. Everything is meaningful or everything is meaningless. Those are the only options you have. And those aren't material assessments. They're not logic and reason. You don't get to logic your way into there being meaning or there being a lack of meaning. The choice is up to you, meaning or meaninglessness. One builds a society based on love, truth, righteousness, and the inherent value of human life, and the other builds a society on still truth, because that is held very highly in a sort of enlightenment worldview, which is one of the reasons that people naturally gravitate towards it, because they certainly got that right. Truth does hold a very high place. So does logic and reason. But along with that truth in this worldview comes hedonism, meaninglessness, selfishness, nihilism, etc. Like I said, the choice is up to you. What are you going to stand by? What are you going to stand for? I implore you to think about some of these ideas. Decide whether or not you're going to have faith. It takes precedence above everything else. Maybe you aren't ready to say that you believe in God, but you still want to have faith in some kind of transcendent good that has defined morality, perhaps created the universe. That's just fine. But sit with that and see where it takes you. Be wise. See what calls to you from there. Because I think if you sit with that idea that there is transcendent good, and you're willing to have faith in that, and you're willing to act in a manner according to that belief, I think it'll take you good places. And if you listen carefully and you're wise, you'll go very far with that. So that's a very, very good place to start. I think that's about it. So I hope this video has given you all something to chew on, and it certainly has for me. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you receive many blessings. Goodbye.